breast cancer accidents combined. So this is a conversation not only in all communities that we should be having this, but particularly in the Black community. This is something that we want to focus on and continue to raise awareness. I want to talk about, in my remaining time, some of the new initiatives that we have going on at OCDV. One of the things that has been extremely exciting about working as part of the de Blasio administration is that, 54% of the policymakers and leadership of this administration are actually women. Commissioners, deputy mayors, and directors, which is extremely exciting. But it's also exciting not only to work for a feminist mayor, but also to have an incredibly feminist first lady. And one of the things that she's been focused on is around mental health, something that has touched the First Family directly. Last year, and as part of this year's budget, the administration is committing $73 million to a citywide mental health initiative. This is unprecedented and hasn't been done before. Specifically for our family justice centers, we will now have psychiatrists and psychotherapists that are able to provide psychiatric and psychopharmacologic treatment, which is tremendous. And we'll be doing this in partnership with the Health and Hospitals Corporation, and certainly we will bring to that work. Thank you, you can clap for that. That will allow us to continue to expand the services that we provide. One of the other things that we're very focused on is really how do we identify high-risk cases for either serious physical harm or homicide before it escalates to that. And one of the things that we have are a domestic violence response team that is focused specifically on public housing. Most people, when they think about crime in public housing, they're not oftentimes associating that with domestic violence. But in years previous, 30% of the increase in crime in public housing has been due to domestic violence. And oftentimes, when you peel back the incidents, it's often related to some kind of intimate partner relationship. So we will be launching the city's first ever citywide domestic violence response team that will allow us to handle high-risk cases from throughout the city. Am I running short on time? All right, see you standing. All right. So a couple of things. We're doing a lot of work on trafficking and also with young people. How many of you have 11 or 12-year-olds? Okay, so I came from a conservative Haitian family, so I didn't start dating till 11 years ago, until I was 41. But I knew I would get a clap by now, right? So one of the things you should know is for 11 and 12-year-olds, 75% of them are dating in the United States. That means we need to start talking to our young people sooner rather than later about the issue. Good clap, thank you. About this, because that's so important. So we have a Healthy Relationship Academy. I know that some of you are going to be participating in that. Elizabeth Falcone, who's our Director of Youth Programming, please participate in it. I think it's a great experience. I just wanted 2 seconds just about the clergy. One of the things that I think is extremely important is to really understand for the clergy how you are all on the front lines, similar to NYPD, FDNY, EMS, in addressing domestic violence. And it's really important that you know about the resources that are available through the city and know that you're not alone, that we are here to support. One of the things that my staff is going to be handing out is a tear-off card that provides information about the resources that the CDB can provide. If you fill that out and give that to my staff, we will follow up with you in order to do DD 101s, Healthy Relationship Academies, and to work with you to make sure that you provide and have the resources that you need for congregants that may be victims. Lastly, I want to encourage all of you to be upstanders. We want to move people, everyone in our congregation, from your religious institutions, we want to move people from being bystanders to domestic violence to being upstanders. And you don't have to be Dorchin, you don't have to be Sally, you don't have to be Reverend Q. In order to do that, all of us, if we did that today, we would make a big difference when it relates to domestic violence. I want to thank Reverend Q. You have been a transformer, you have been an actualizer, and you have mobilized this community. And I so appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you for your time.
Let's give the commissioner another hand, please. I know it's not enough time for all the information to deal with on such a powerful and important subject as this. So hopefully next year we'll have 2 days for the conference. Come on now, yeah. 2 days. It's important. All right, at this time I'd like to bring up someone that I call my sister. None other than the Reverend Sally McNichol, who's the co-executive director of Connect. And I would like her to talk about, as Commissioner talked about the importance of the city and the government playing such an important part, she also mentioned how important it is for the houses of worship to get involved. We too often sit back, sit behind, and don't speak up enough. It's time that we speak up. We are known as the voice of morality, and we are supposed to be the prophetic voice. So we are supposed to speak where we're often not want to be heard, but it's important that we do what we should do and not what other people want us to do. So at this point, I will bring up Reverend Sally McNichol.
So, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Reverend Q, so much, Commissioner Kim and Dorchin, and everybody here. You know, it's, we were talking earlier about having done this work for a long, long time, and I've done it for a long time, and it's hard, hard work. But one thing that's just extraordinary about it are the people that do the work. And I just want to give a hand to all the people that I've gotten to work with that just do so much work. And you know, as I was thinking about my remarks today, this has been such a rich time already. There's so much to say. But you know, as the commissioner said, the clergy is so important. So I want to talk about, I've been at Connect, we've been working with faith communities for a long time, well, not a long, long time, but 12, 15 years, and we've been struggling. I see some of the people that we partner with in the audience here. Susan Gambler has an amazing ministry at Greater Springfield Community Church called the Safe Faith Communities Ministry. So it's really possible to do this work in a deep way. But I want to talk a little bit, and somewhat in response to our brothers who spoke earlier too, about how important looking at some of the deeper issues in our faith communities. We have now understood, finally, that this is a spiritual problem. This is a moral problem. It's many kinds of problems, but at its base, it is a spiritual and moral problem that we, as people of faith, and there are many, many, many people of faith inside of the houses of worship, outside, but as people of faith who care about the moral and spiritual health of our world, we are in an incredible position to put forward the idea that we can actually live in a non-violent and peaceful society. And this is what we really need to believe, that peace is possible. I was thinking about, oh yeah, and I wanted to say too, that as we've understood it as a spiritual problem, what the Commissioner was speaking of, and earlier some of the people I heard on the panel were talking about it being an intersectional problem. So we know that it's connected to everything, like the spirit is the root. So that intersectionality part of it, as we use that word, which is kind of overused, but you know, all these things are connected. Last year, the Commissioner said one of my favorite lines, which is that, tell me if I'm right, the gender justice is a structural beam of all of our struggles for justice. I think that's really good, that gender justice is the structural beam for all of our struggles for justice. So I want us to really think about that. But, you know, I was thinking about if I was going to give a name to this talk, it would be, this is a new day. Because of these facts I've been saying, it's a new day that we think of it as a spiritual problem, that we see the connections, and now we have to go deep. And Reverend Salguero talked about our new narratives. And some of those new narratives, some of the things that we have to do to create that new narrative is what I think we must be very concerned with now. For instance, just an example, and this is not to point out any one speaker or anything, but we talked about, the rabbi talked about the story of David, and how David had to acknowledge that he had raped Tamar. And some people say Bathsheba, you know, in that story. I don't know if everybody knows that story. But that he had to acknowledge and that he had to be accountable. And that's a really important part of the narrative. But we can't forget that actually Tamar, the person who was victimized, it was erased from the narrative. And that we don't know her story anymore. We know David's story. So we need to move those people who've been erased from the narrative back into the middle of the narrative. And one of the projects we did with the Interfaith Center of New York was we interviewed 50 spiritual and religious leaders, and we talked to them about what did they think about domestic violence, what did they think the root causes were, what were they concerned about, did they know where to go, what were the resources, and the question, what most concerned them about this problem was really interesting, because out of the 50 people who answered that questionnaire, only one person of faith talked about the suffering of women. And so I actually didn't know I was going to go in this direction, but I think this is where we really must lift up the suffering of women. We have to have, you know, our deep consciousness is shaped by ideas of domination and subordination. We have a kind of supremacist logic that runs through everything we do, and those are all the isms. But we have white supremacy, we have male supremacy, we have supremacy inside of ourselves, and one part of ourselves is more important than another part of ourselves. And what we need to do is shift, and this is hard because this is embedded and deeply. We need to shift from looking at one thing is better than another, domination and subordination, and we need to shift to a partnership model. Now that's ideal, that's a big thing to shift to, but we have to start thinking in terms of equal sacred value of men and women, of people with sexualities that are not of the so-called norm. This is so critical because a lot of our practices, we unconsciously re-inscribe these attitudes. So what I've seen in my work with ministries is very often someone will come and say, I really want to work on building this ministry in my church, and I want to help the people out there, and I want to help the women out there. And then what happens is we start to realize that all of us, women and men, are those people out there, and that we have wounds to heal, and that we have ideas and our theologies and the way we read scripture that we start to look at. And this is a hard process, but we need each other to do it. My wonderful co-leader, Q, talked about making the spaces of safety and places where we can think critically. So I just want to, I'm checking the time. I just want to say that what you can do in your faith communities is make these spaces and start to say, what do we mean by forgiveness? What do we mean by sin? And how are those things coming out? I'm just using those two examples. We can talk about shame. We can talk about so many things. And we sometimes talk about these things in our theological roundtables. But this is the kind of work we need to do. We can't not just give sermons. We cannot just know about the resources. We have to change our hearts and create a new heart inside of us that really is very deeply rooted in compassion and not punishment. And I think that this is probably one of the most critical things, because all of us who do the work know that victim blaming is kind of the heart of the problem. That any obstacle in our faith communities is, it's always like, did she do this? Or, you know, did he do that? I mean, that we do this in every area of our life, and it's a knee-jerk reaction in all of our cultures and in the dominant culture, is to say, what did that person do wrong? So we really have to look at the way our different ideas, our theological ideas, and our scriptures are impacting the way we approach this. And then we can understand how to use the resources the right way. Because if we don't understand those things, we can have the resources, but we won't reach out to them. You know, we have to really understand why it's critical, and to help those systems and resources be the best that they can be. So this is a new day. This is a new time of partnership with the people of faith, people of spirit, and the systems and the resources out there. This could really make a huge impact. And I want to just say one final thing, because one of the hardest parts of the work too is looking not just at our theological doctrines as part of this, the way we think in Scripture, but looking at the way power is arranged in our communities. Well, how is power arranged in your faith community? Who's doing all the work? Who's making the decisions? Whose word is being spoken and whose words are being silenced? Whose suffering is lifted up and whose suffering is silenced? We have to talk about women who need to be released from prison. We have to talk about women who are being brutalized by the police. We have to be in partnership about this. So I believe my time is up, and I just want to thank you all again for the work that you do, for the great potential we have, and I just hope we can really pray deeply and believe that this is possible. We do not have to live in a society where a woman has to be afraid when she's pregnant that the leading cause of death, maternal death by some studies, and second leading cause in other studies, for pregnant women is homicide. We cannot live in a society like that. It cannot happen. So, thank you.